All right, welcome back, Business Freedom Podcast listeners. I am super excited today. I've got Kati Spaniak from the North Shore of Chicago, which apparently is north of Chicago, which makes sense. And we had a conversation. This was just last week, and I said, Kati, you've got to come on the podcast. And it was a conversation around the difference a year could make and really what Kati focused on over the course of this last year that is giving her a lighter feeling around her business and just a feeling of success in her life. And Kati, why don't you start off with 60 seconds about where you are in your real estate business? What will the GCI look like this year? Kind of give us a quick facts about Kati Spaniak.
Yeah, so I run a real estate team north of Chicago on the North Shore. I grew up here. I've lived here my whole life. I got into real estate in 2003, but I ended up getting out of it when I would have my little kids. And so I got back in about 2012 and just started building it up in my team. So this past year we did 51 million in revenue. In volume, and then we were at about 95 transactions, and GCI we were about 1.4 million. And so my team is probably like most people's teams, kind of fluid. I have a couple people that have been with me a couple of years, but it's here and there, and I do pretty much most of the volume though.
Yeah, that is an awesome way to say that. I'm going to totally steal from now. My team is fluid.
Oh, okay.
It's fluid. It doesn't, sound as bad as it's a complete crap show.
Yeah, we're not a complete crap show now.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into talk about the shift in perspective that you've kind of gone through in the last year. You mentioned morning routine. You mentioned just how you're looking at your business and your life. Just kind of chat about that. Where were you at a year ago?
So, I push myself pretty hard, and not for external recognition, but just for my own internal desires. And I guess I'm not going to say I'm not satisfied, but kind of like you said, my bar is always kind of moving. And so I'm always striving for more, always working harder. And I really always try to be the best person I can be all the way around. It's kind of what I believe I'm here on this planet for, is to be the best I can be and to help give that to other people as well. And so, my business has really done great in the last, 6-7 years. Surprisingly, of course, it's never really enough. What is really enough? And so last year, I sort of spent a lot of money trying to build this business and grow this business. And I was just constantly under a lot of pressure financially, as far as, I'm putting the money back into the business. I'm putting the money back into the business. And I got to a point where I didn't really kind of know what I was doing anymore. And exercise has always been a very big part of my life. And it was last December, I was like, I'm done exercising. And I just stopped, and I couldn't figure out why. I just sort of stopped. And I was confused. I wasn't feeling good about myself. And I ended up starting slow, and trying to really sort of reassess myself and my life and my health and who I was. And I picked up the Miracle Morning, and I had it literally on my nightstand for 4 years. And I read a lot of those types of books. And so I was like, well, how is this one going to be different than anything else? And I think just the perspective on it of starting kind of small. I ended up, one of the things that he talks about is exercise every morning. And I sort of took that as a more moving rather than going out there and running for 7 miles, just getting some movement. And so I started to say to myself, I'm just going to move every day, and I'm going to move for 5 minutes, meaning I'm going to exercise for 5 minutes. And if I don't feel like doing it after 5 minutes, I'm done. And I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm just going to be okay with it and just say, hey, it's just not my day. And since I've been taking that pressure off of myself, I really have been able to keep up an exercise routine of 5 to 7 days a week. And I really contribute that to being like one of the main reasons why I've been able to get myself pulled back together in this last year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's I was thinking of my own sort of personal journey with a morning routine. Um it's making those little commitments. I'm going to commit to putting my running shoes on.
Right.
Like if I could just get my running shoes on, it's going to be silly if I don't, go out and run for a little bit. Um, Talk about, you mentioned, you always have these big goals. You're always kind of getting after something. Talk about, we had another conversation where, and then I want to talk about the profitability part after that, because that's a huge topic, and one of my biggest passions right now. But talk about, and maybe I'll tee it up a little bit. A lot of times when we compare ourselves, even when we have these goals that are always out there and they're always moving. So if I get to 50 million, that'll be a great business. I'm
Right.
sure at one point you said 50 million would be like life changing. And
Yeah.
now it's like, well, if I can only get to 100 million, it'd be like, it'd be amazing. And so the challenge with, a moving target is that you will never achieve it. And you are always looking forward at the things you're not achieving. And so you're always in this gap versus looking back on what you have achieved. And I think what you're saying with the morning routine is like, not every morning is going to be perfect. And I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I was.
Right.
And I think that's the mentality that we need to have as business owners, is that if you're really taking a long-term view of your business, then what is the freaking rush? Like we will kill all the joy in today for a year from now, and I'll have a ton of joy because I'm going to achieve my goal. Talk about the conversation we had where you had your spreadsheet built out, and and you're like, 3 years I'm going to be here. And on the call, it seemed to me that the conversation we had gave you a lot of peace.
Yeah.
What happened during that call?
So I think I've started to really figure out how to grow the team through systems and processes. And I think it was sort of like a light bulb for me. So once I did that, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And so it was easy for me to just kind of say, okay, well, if we do this, then we'll be at a certain place in 3 years. And you were like, I was like, so what do you think of this? And you're like, that's pretty big, and then you were kind of like, and why? It was almost like, and why? And I was like, well, I don't know why. And it sort of made me take a step back. And the moment I took a step back from these huge, gigantic goals that are achievable, probably based on what I know about myself, once I took a step back and I kind of maybe extended those goals, it was like this huge relief came over me. Like, oh my God, I can go to work. I can enjoy my job. I can enjoy my life. I don't have to constantly be pushing myself towards this goal that I've just sort of picked out of the air. And I think that really was, yeah, because you were like, why? I'm like, I don't really know why. So that was a great conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like the more that I do this kind of work, the more I realize that sometimes I'll challenge the hardest chargers. Like being a hard charger is just completely exhausting.
Right.
It's exhausting to yourself, and it's exhausting to everyone around you, your team members, your spouse, your children. And so I think as I've been really realizing that for me personally, I've been sort of, it's probably like failure in coaching 101, but it's projecting. I think this one is worth projecting though. Like really, why do you want this? Let's just be honest. Why do you want to grow? And then once you can be honest about that, everything else falls into place. One other thing I want to chat about, and it kind of leads into, or it fits into this conversation. We talk about a very specific, economic model, like building a business that, you mentioned earlier that you threw money at things, or you spent money because it was going to help you grow, versus being really diligent about the economic model. And, I'm in some groups right now that are talking about big businesses, 2 to 6 million GCI businesses that are losing money. in a really good market. And you wonder if those team leaders are like thinking, yeah, but I'm going to make a little bit of money on each transaction, if they're really running a team. How has your mindset shifted around, the economic model, what you're building, and I haven't told you any names, but some big teams that are losing money that we think we want to be these guys. And it's like, I don't want to build a $6 million business that loses money. So what's your perspective on the whole making money, economic model, systems, all of that?
I was tired of not having any money is really what it came down to, like for my own personal life. And I realized that, I was spending so much money on the business that I wasn't bringing it into myself or my family. And then it was like, what am I doing with this? I mean, I was making more money as a single agent, because I didn't have all the expenses. Now, of course, now I feel like I have more of a work-life balance, but I'm not making close to the money I was making then. And it was sort of, I think that was when we first started talking and you had talked about how important that was. And I hadn't really delved into that. And I read Profit First. It took me a few months to get to that. But once I read that, it was like just a light went on. And I was like, what am I doing? And so I think with the shift in my mental attitude about not having to be at this next level, which you're right, just keeps moving, and saying, you know what, I want a certain lifestyle for myself. I can do it right now. Now, what does that mean as far as my expenses? And it's just, I had never heard from anybody, my coaches or anybody, that some of these teams were not making any money until you started saying it. And then I was like, right, I can see that because I know what it's like. How can they be doing this? And I'm doing this and I'm not making any money. Like, so how are they making money? And so I really felt like not everybody was being honest about that. And I think that the shift that real estate agents do need to have is, what are those expenses, that we're putting out, and what are we getting back for it, and the lead sources and everything you kind of talk about, I've really taken in. And financially, I mean, I used to be in such a worse place as far as mentally, now I feel good about it. So I just have taken sort of a step back, and I've allowed myself to live my life more fully, I think, by not worrying about the money or the stress or things like that.
Yeah. And it's, when you think about the resources we have available as business owners, it's people and money, so we can spend money on things to grow, or we can hold our people accountable, but it's holding the dollars accountable and holding the people accountable, and, I know guys that'll sell close to $200 million worth of real estate and not make money. I know a guy that'll do 700 transactions, and he's a coach to the industry. And I know someone who's coached by him. He said, yeah, he's got a great culture. I'm like, I could have like a great culture if I just overpaid everybody and like lost money. Like, we can't go the profit optional route, like Redfin and, Open Door or OfferPad, Zillow, or Zillow is definitely not profit optional. They're making tons of money. But what advice would you have, for someone who is like living in that gap? I feel like in real estate, we focus on all of everybody else, and how what they're doing. And what advice would you have someone that's like in that gap where it doesn't really matter their production, but they're just having a tough time of it because they're not where they want to be?
I would say that it's looking at other people and what they're doing, and thinking that what they're doing is the right way to do it. For a long time, I tried to do what other people were doing, and it wasn't me. It wasn't how I ran my business. And, so what I would say is that a lot of people in the real estate industry talk really great about what's happening, but, in reality, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that's hard, and financially, and hiring. I mean, we talk about that all the time. And I think it would be, don't compare yourself to others and build your business on you. Just because everybody else does expired calls or FISBOs calls doesn't mean you have to do that. Make it work for you. And I think that's sort of what I tried to fit myself into all these different roles, and it didn't work. And I just took a step back to say, okay, who am I? And how do I want my business to be based on what I know is best for me?
Yeah, that's really good. It makes me think of, in a week, well, as of this recording, are you on? I think you may literally be on stage this time next week. Do you know what the name of the panel that you're on is called?
Struggle is real.
The struggle is real. So one thing that we are just really transparent about is that first of all, we have you sort of calibrate your mind around a long-term view of business. The goal of business is to be in business and enjoy it. It's a long-term game. And once you do that, you can enjoy every piece of it, because every piece is going to bring struggle. If you've never recruited people before, that is such a squirrely world, of sitting down with people that they're going to be awesome and they tell you so, and then they're not awesome. Very slim part of the population is awesome. So I just thought it was really good. Any advice around the morning routine? I feel like I've gone away from, and now probably for about 2 years, I've been really on point with my morning routine. What advice could we give? I read the Miracle Morning. It didn't click with me, but what are 3 tips you can give if all you get from, time here listening to Kati? These are the 3 tips she would give around your morning routine.
I would say, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up about not doing the exercise. Exercise is more than just trying to lose weight. It's about feeling good about who you are. So I would say, be kind to yourself. And I would also say, some type of movement in the morning is still movement, and don't discount a walk or, spending time with, your spouse, going for a walk, things like that. And then just a third thing, I would say, if it doesn't happen that morning, don't beat yourself up. Just move on and try it the next day. And don't get into that rut where you're like, well, I didn't do it yesterday, and now I'm terrible, and now I'm not going to do it tomorrow. And then you end up like a week later. Just be kind to yourself and just say, you know what, I'm just going to move a little bit. And then just go and do it. And if it doesn't work for that day, say, you know what, it just didn't work today.
Yeah. And then the only thing I would add on top of that, I tried the 5 a.m. thing, and it is not for me.
Yeah, I can't do that either.
It is not for me. And we have little kids that dictate when we wake up. So I'm generally up at 6, but I would say make sure you get to bed. There's usually nothing good that happens after 9 p.m. Your kids are in bed. It's usually, you're watching stuff you shouldn't watch, like you're watching Netflix, or, you're snacking on stuff you shouldn't snack. So the closer you can get to bed to 9 o'clock, the better, because then you have a better shot at waking up closer to, before 6. Most people that have young kids, they probably have to get up a little bit ahead of your kids, to get that early push in. This is awesome. The thing I've taken from you and what I've learned from you, because I really feel like I learn from everyone I get to know. It was just something you said today. Don't be so hard on yourself. I have spent so much time being so hard on myself, and as a result, I'm really hard on other people, and that can't feel good. Being around, and this is me in real time, realizing that I'm just not real gracious with myself. And I think I'm probably tough to be around, for some of the key people in my life. My wife, being the most important person, I'm probably miserable to be around sometimes, because I'm always trying to achieve. This is awesome. I'm just happy to be part of your life. And I think this was really the mindset shift, in just a year. Morning routine, not thinking you have to go from, 100 to 1,000 homes in a single year. And then the other thing I took away is just um, knowing that when you're in the gap, knowing when you're sort of looking ahead, when you should just be looking backwards. The saying that we use in my men's group is, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I was, and I sort of use that in my faith walk. Like, I'm not exactly where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be. I used to be, way worse off. So I appreciate you and your time. And this is going to be awesome for our listeners. Thanks, Katie.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.